Jak przeprogramować samodestrukcyjne wierzenia, jak uzdrowić się przez pozbycie się strachu, złości, zazdrości, nienawiści i innych negatywnych, destrukcyjnych uczuć oraz jak uzdrowić swoje ciało, pozbyć się toksyczności i niedoborów.
At releasing anger and opening up and changing your reality. Most people don't know how to release and reprogram limiting or self-destructive beliefs. And this is something I've specialized in for many, many years. When I first started doing workshops in healing, that I always had sections on mind control and trauma release, because it doesn't matter how much raw food you eat, if you've got emotions inside and turmoil inside and anger or fear or self-destructive beliefs or death wishes, which, by the way, we all have a death wish to a certain degree. It's only when it becomes too much that it becomes a problem. But a lot of people will manifest their death or disease simply from their beliefs. And so we've got to release that. We've got to reprogram those beliefs. Most people have physically toxic bodies and nutritional deficiencies, and this definitely gets worse as you get older. But I can tell you, young people now have deficiencies and health problems that people that were in their 50s or 60s or 70s on up had years ago, and now young people are getting these things because the food supply is so depleted of nutrients. There's so much toxicity in this world, and when that baby is being built, it's using the raw materials in the mother. The mothers usually are deficient in various ways unless they're smart and eating properly and supplementing and stuff like that. There are certain raw food teachers, a lot of them actually out there, that say that, you don't need to take supplements, you can just get everything from your food. And that's true if you're growing your own food or if you've got somebody locally growing food for you in good nutrient-dense soil. And you're not deficient when you start eating it to begin with. But in my experience, pretty much everybody these days has to supplement, because you cannot get access to food unless you're growing it yourself that has sufficient levels of nutrients in it. Toxic liver, man, that's a big one. Whenever you see people that just pop and get mad at the drop of a hat or something little, it's toxic liver. If it's not, the point is, you can be happy, feel good most of the time, and have fun, magical life no matter what your age. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be tra-la-la-la fun. Sometimes there's good things that sometimes come out of difficulty. So there's a purpose to it. But generally, life can be pretty good and pretty magical and pretty fun. I was just our own mountains to climb. I realized this a long, long time ago when I was working with individual clients, because I would see this huge variety of people, and it's like some people would have, minor issues that they need to deal with, and other people would just have some horrific things to deal with. We are the ones that create our own mountains to climb, and we do it to learn and to grow. And it's really based on our beliefs. I mean, I've seen this over and over again with people's path, sometimes being really difficult because they believed that it needed to be that way. And if I was working with them, I would get them to see that, no, it doesn't have to be that way, Friends and activities that reinforce our beliefs and keep us in our comfort zones. We all do this, And, it's not necessarily a bad thing unless it doesn't serve you well. And a lot of people, it doesn't serve them well. They'll attract people that will keep them believing in the stuff that's creating the trauma and drama and difficulties in their life. And so one of the things that, these financial freedom seminars and empowerment seminars usually do is they teach to change your circle of friends, to, change your way of thinking. I was in a financial freedom mentoring program with John Astor through language, and you have to do it over and over again because it's like learning an instrument. You don't do it in a week or two. You do it over time, just like learning an instrument. You've got to exercise the mind. But that thermostat that we have in our minds, psychologists call it the psychocybernetic mechanism, but it's basically us attracting the people and events that support our worldview and keep it where it's at instead of changing it. Change is not easy. And so one of the things that I learned in working with John Assaraf was getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Now, social media. I unplugged from social media last March, and man, do I love it. It's funny too, because I spent years building up a following on social media because everybody said, like all these marketing people I was listening to said, oh, you got to be on social media, you got to be on social media. And I would ask, like, I'd have friends that would get huge numbers of people following them really quickly. And I was like, how did you do it? And they wouldn't tell me. And then, so I spent years, working up a following on social media. And then I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. And so I got rid of it. It was actually Elon Musk that impulsed me to do it, because for me, social media was a real grind, because every time I get on there, I've got 200 questions waiting for me, and people being snarky and all that kind of stuff. And I never get to see my real friends. It's always some bozos who are occupying, that don't have a life, and they're posting 100 times a day and that kind of stuff. And so it just wasn't fun. I get down there and talk to him at some point.
Yeah, well, he's being demonized, you might know.
Of course, because he's trying to free humanity.
Exactly.
He's developing technologies. And by the way, I heard recently that he's got free energy. I assumed this a few years ago by looking at what he was doing, but supposedly Elon Musk has free energy technology that he's just waiting to be allowed to release. Because he's building that gigantic battery factory in, I think, Utah or somewhere. It's like they call it the
They're
Giga.
after him every turn he does.
Exactly. Just coming out an electric car. Everybody was fighting him. The governor of New Jersey banned electric cars and banned Tesla from selling cars in New Jersey, and so it's ridiculous. But unfortunately that's the reality when you have any technology or anything that is really freeing humanity. You're going to get attacked heavily by the powers that be. I've had death threats and had to go into hiding with PayPay because of technologies I developed. I have had friends murdered who developed free energy technologies and stuff like that. It's a sad state of the world. I wonder why. This is one of the major reasons why. We've got trauma-based mind control that has been going on this planet for thousands of years, but it's gotten very sophisticated since World War II. Hitler developed some very advanced technologies and methods for mind controlling masses of populations and individuals. And basically what they discovered is that when you traumatize somebody, right and left brain hemisphere function splits. And so when the right and left brain hemisphere function splits, it's kind of like it's a safety mechanism of the mind, so that if you're, let's say, involved in a car wreck or some big trauma, the mind will compartmentalize that and say, that wasn't me. And it keeps you from going insane, reliving a horrible trauma like a horrific car wreck or something like that. But even little traumas, like just something like the guy at the grocery store being rude to you, that puts a little ding into your mind. It makes the hemisphere function separate a little bit. And over time, all the slings and arrows of life accumulate along with the big traumas. And it winds up compartmentalizing your mind, and it also winds up opening you up when the trauma is going on. It opens you up to suggestion right afterwards. So the powers that be and Hitler and them studied this quite a bit and are very, very familiar with how it works, and they've been using it. They used it a lot in Nazi Germany, and ever since, when the war ended and the U.S. and Great Britain and Russia went into Nazi Germany to grab the spoils of war, they saw all these horrific experiments that the Nazi scientists were doing. And they were afraid that if the U.S. and Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, and Great Britain were afraid if they didn't go and grab as much of it as they could, somebody else would get it and use it against them. And so the United States grabbed most of the mind scientists, the Soviet Union got a lot of them, and the Brits got some of them. And they basically, instead of squashing those programs, they brought them to the U.S. and they expanded them. And so ever since World War II, this has been a part and parcel of the military-industrial complex. It's used routinely in programming of soldiers, but it's also used routinely on all of us, in the media, in schooling, in every facet of our lives. That's how we're all programmed. That's why when you encounter people who have an illogical belief in something like, let's say, the medical system, when you look at the facts of how abysmal the medical system is with treating cancer, for example, and yet so many people will go and get irradiated and chemotherapy and surgery and all this stuff that doesn't work, and they won't listen to anything else. The reason is because of this kind of programming. This stuff is slipped in all the time in various ways. When my 12-year-old nephew came and lived with us for a few years, I would sit and read his textbooks, and they were full of programming. They were full of programming and disinformation. How this programming works, you see it being used all the time. All over the internet, in the news, on YouTube and social media all the time. And so people are having these Pavlovian reactions constantly. They're living like an amoeba, responding to stimuli rather than consciously creating their reality. Dark skin versus light skin. And again, I lived and worked with Martin Luther King's family. I know what really went on with them and with King's assassination, and that is a story for another day. But the stuff that you see in public, like on PBS and all that, it's all bullshit. Wikipedia is a good source of information. Wikipedia is a good source of information on celebrities, maybe. But yeah, all of these are controlled. Even Google. You can use search engines that do not have the bias that Google has. Google leaves out a lot of really interesting, empowering information.
What's a better search than Start Page?
What's Start Page, DuckDuckGo? Really simple one. And we have all heard this. We all know this. Practice gratitude, right? How do you practice gratitude? Here's a really simple way. Go find somebody who's homeless or dirt poor and in difficulty. Help them out. You'll be happy for everything you got.
Yeah.
Another great one. This is one that I demand in my life. I absolutely must be in environments that are beautiful and pleasant and nice.
Yep.
You know, quiet and observing your breath. What happens is that mind chatter, that monkey mind, eventually it goes away. For most people, it takes about 4 or 5 days, and you're sitting there and you're supposed to be meditating and you're supposed to be focusing on the breath coming out of your nostrils and just observing your breath, observing your breath. And you do that for about 30 seconds, and then you go, did I leave the toaster on or the oven? Or your mind wanders, and you have to keep bringing it back and bringing it back to the meditation. And after about 4 or 5 days of that, eventually you get to where the monkey mind goes away and it goes blank because it is telling you a vision. You're buying into somebody else's reality. Much more fun to create your own reality. My life is so much more interesting and fun than anything that anybody could conjure up on TV, especially in Hollywood. I mean, man, I go to Bosnia and I'm hanging out in the pyramids in Bosnia and seeing blue energy and getting healings and seeing entities and meeting all kinds of mind-blowing people and having all kinds of mind-blowing experiences. Do this and learn the techniques, you will see it. Emotional freedom technique. This is another one. With a good practitioner, now this is the technique you can use yourself. You can do it with yourself, and basically it's tapping. When you clean your liver out especially, life becomes a lot easier. And as you get older, it's more important, you know. And I'll tell you young folks something. Good health in your 70s starts in your 20s and 30s. So you're very fortunate to have the parents that you have with the awareness that you have, because you guys can grow up healthy and happy and strong. But it will take more effort for you guys, because in the last 100 or so years, every generation has been getting sicker and weaker than the previous one. Because, for example, my mother's generation, they ate food that was much more nutrient dense with much more mineralization. And my mom, I can't believe she's still alive the way she eats and lives. But she's like 86 years old and still driving and kicking. And my grandmother lived to be 99, you know, and they didn't eat health food at all. She was eating the typical Southern diet, fried chicken and liver mush and, you know, sandwiches, and, you know, but they grew everything they ate. It makes a huge difference. So, you know, the important thing is to get testing and find out if you've got nutrient deficiencies, correct them before they become out of hand.
And you know, it's funny.
And then acidity. You know, the main, what causes degeneration and disease in the body is acidity and toxicity. It's very simple. And our emotions, by the way, can create acidity in our body. But the main source of acidity in the body is from cooked food. And so this is why living foods are important. You know, you got to get at least 80% of your diet uncooked living food. Human beings are the only organisms on this planet that eat cooked food, and we're the only ones that have the diseases and things that come from that as well. And then nutritional deficiencies. This is a major one for depression. I see lots and lots of people who have depression and emotional issues, mood swings, propensity to crying, that kind of stuff. Mineral deficiencies. You get them on some minerals, boom. It's important to have fun. It's really important. I mean, I have to have fun. You know, the moment that I'm in a job and I'm not having fun, I gotta leave. And so years ago, I got out of the corporate world and out of my corporate job when it was no longer fun. And it wasn't easy because it was a really well-paying job and it was security and all that kind of stuff. But it was a really good decision, as it turned out. In the United States, 70% of Americans are on pharmaceuticals, at least one pharmaceutical, and half of those are on more than one pharmaceutical. And antidepressants are one of the major drugs that are being dispensed of those. Happiness. You know, I see this all the time. I bump into sick people all the time, and they'll be telling me about their disease or whatever, and I'll say to them, well, you know, you don't have to suffer with that. There's a cure for that. And I've probably done that hundreds of times over the years, and I think maybe once or twice I've had somebody actually go, tell me more. Usually people are like telling me all their problems and all their diseases and stuff, and I go, well, actually there's a cure for diabetes. You can get rid of it within 30 days, usually type 1 within a week. And they don't go, what? Tell me more. They just keep on complaining like I didn't say anything. And beliefs about health and wealth and wellness and happiness, it's programming. It's programming in the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, and we all have it. It comes from, you know, from birth throughout our lives in various ways. We get programmed. Usually the heaviest programming comes at a very early age, before we're 5 years old. And when we encounter things, we decide based on what we encounter, this is the way the world is, and this is the way reality is. So breaking that programming can take effort. Sometimes it can happen in an instant. You know, I've heard many times people talk about, you know, something changed their life in an instant, and, you know, everything was different. And I never really had an experience like that until I went and did landmark education, and within like a few seconds, what they said changed my life. It sucks because humans have been mind controlled into fear and survival mode for millennia. The powers that be on this planet for thousands of years realized a long, long time ago that it benefits them if they keep us believing in a reality that they've constructed, so that they can benefit and basically harvest us for our energy and for our efforts. You know, we work physical labor, we do jobs, and we trade that for money, and that money is filtered through the tax system and the interest system and the financial systems, and basically real labor, every human being on this planet is being harvested in this way. And so the powers that be understand that they've got to keep people in a very limited reality where they're controlled and in fear and believing in this system that is being created to harvest from these people on the planet. And so they spend lots of time and money doing that. And this is why you see so much nonsense in the media, even on the internet. You know, there's most of what's online and what's in social media and what's in the news is bogus. And I've had the unusual opportunity on many occasions to see, have personal experiences with things that are in the public eye, that are getting into the media, and I know the real story behind them. And so I've seen this happening over and over again. Stop to take a break and look at their lives and examine their lives and what they do and what they think. It's what Socrates called the unexamined life. You know, a group like this, you're going to have a lot of people who do that. Probably most, if not everybody in this room does that. But, you know, I forget, because of the kinds of groups that I speak to and the way that I live, I tend to forget how bad a lot of people's lives are until I get out and go visit my family or other people. But really, you know, it's like a lot of people are suffering, and even when I say, well, look, here's the solution, you know, it's like, no, they're not interested in it. It's because very, very deep programming and trauma and things like that. But yeah, it just blows my mind that people do not ever take a step back and go, what is this all about? Why am I living this way? Why is my reality this way? Why am I having these problems? Or, you know, that years ago, gosh, it was probably when I was in my 20s, I had always believed this within myself, but I was surrounded in an environment growing up in North Carolina in the South, you know, between the Ku Klux Klan and all of the civil rights things that were going on around me, and growing up in a family that was very poor and ignorant. I always believed within myself that I created my reality, but nobody around me mirrored that. And so I really, really had to work to keep my mind out of the limited reality and the limited beliefs that were surrounding me everywhere. In my family, in school, in Boy Scouts, at church, all these places, it was just all this nonsense. I got in a lot of trouble because of that too. I took, for example, when I was in Boy Scouts, I took the God and Country badge, and I had to meet with a minister every week to talk about God and the nature of reality and that kind of stuff. I know in my own education in electrical engineering that I was indoctrinated with a bunch of physics and math and biology and chemistry and things that I found out later was probably 90% bogus, just totally wrong. So anyway, most people buy into the reality that's being sold to them. And I say sold because this is being sold to us through our media, through social media, through the internet, through all of these institutions that are basically programmed people programming other people.